You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of WebTrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. WebTrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. Whichever stage you're at in your conversion rate optimization journey, whether you're just starting out or been doing CRO for some time, you should be mindful of the need to continually test to ensure you're getting the most out of your digital assets. So today, I'm discussing ideas with Steven Shyne, co-founder and COO of US-based CXperts, about how to plan beyond the quick wins to develop sustainable, ongoing test concepts. Steven, the title of this podcast is How Do You Continue to Feed the CRO Engine? But before we go into that, I'd like to have a little bit of information about what CXperts do and what's your specializations.
Sure. CXperts, we're a digital consultancy that works with a number of different organizations, a lot of times e-commerce, especially trying to help understand, connect, and empathize with their end users. And typically that's done through analytics, user experience, research, strategy, and design, as well as voice of customer, sentiment analysis, and then running all those different inputs into conversion rate optimization, or CRO for short, of course. And we pride ourselves on being able to grab information from various sources, synthesize them into hypotheses that are highly testable, and then using that information to ensure that we're making data-informed decisions and all the things that are probably headline-worthy. But because we've been able to advocate for this in our approach, we've seen a marked difference between customers of ours that are using a number of different inputs and those that are using maybe one or two, and the overall velocity of tests, the win rate of their tests, and the just general efficacy of their CRO programs. So I know that I probably answered your question of what time it is by building you a clock, but that's something that we definitely pride ourselves in is running not just tests, because running an experiment, I dare say anyone, asterisk, can run an experiment, but to run an experimentation program takes much more. And so, yeah, it definitely ties back into the title of there is a CRO engine and you need to continue to feed it or else the train will just run out of steam.
I'm loving your analogies already. But let me put this into context. That this kind of podcast is if we think that Google Free is no longer available, many companies are now having to justify the cost of a paid CRO solution, be that through an agency or by doing it themselves, to be honest. When it was free and companies were doing their own CRO, return on investment was important. But now real money has to change hands, and therefore the decision to continue with CRO has to show value. How can you determine value? And does all value have to have a monetary element?
Definitely value is something that has always been part of the conversation. And you're right. When you have free tools or maybe a really scrappy version of a CRO program, the ROI is much easier to prove out. Did experiments make us projected revenues? Can we tie that back to some of our overall conversion rates or KPIs? Sure. But when you start to add in additional team members, UX development analysts and the like, your team costs surge, but also when you mature into a program, let's say, again, Google Optimize is no longer an option for teams, and they may need to turn to paid experimentation platforms. Absolutely. Once those numbers start to stack up, then ROI becomes much more important to start to think about, and not at the end of the program, not at a annual cycle. But you should be thinking about that early on. Because if you can ensure that you have your measurements in place, your success criteria already established with leadership, you don't have to try to make that up as you go or avoid the situation where maybe there's a moving goalpost where you say, yeah, we increased conversion rates, or the line is established earlier on of these are the kind of magnitudes that we're looking for.
So I would agree with you in that, but a lot of companies are kind of, and I use the words probably inadvisedly, are fumbling around with CRO because it didn't have an actual cost associated with it.
Hmm.
And doing what you do, and many of the other companies out there that are doing a very organized program of CRO, it seems that those people who have been free are now looking to be able to say, well, how do I justify this cost? And they look for
Hmm.
quick wins, obviously, in the first instance, to be able to say, hey, we've got this, we're now spending some money with an agency or with a solution, and therefore I've been able to cover that cost, or we've seen an increase or an ROI. And so ROI is kind of stamped into CRO at the very beginning. By the very nature, it's sort of conversion rate optimization seems to mean that actually you're going to get money out of making more conversions. But I think that quick wins can only last for so long. So how does a company plan for the next phase after the quick wins have been won?
You're absolutely right, John, that quick wins are there and they're useful, but they have a lifespan. And for some people, they could benefit from quick wins for up to a year, maybe, or some longer.
Mm-hmm.
But they will run out. And that's where you need to ensure that you have multiple inputs. Even something so simple as a piece of quantitative information like Google Analytics, which a lot of companies, most companies, dare I say, all companies
Mm-hmm.
have, or at least a flavor of it, and qualitative. Make sure you're talking with your consumers, the people that are visiting your website, the people that are paying you money, and understand what are their wants, preferences, and pain points. Those two things alone can give you a fairly good glimpse into things and ensure that you're solving things in the right areas and you're solving the right things. So that's sort of the baseline of how do you move off of your quick wins is ensure you have qual and quant coming together. Absolutely, once you start to spin that up, you'll see the benefits and hopefully you'll see that your tests have a higher chance of success. You'll also see that you have more test ideas, and that's how you start to feed the machine.
So are you saying that a company should be, in the very early stages, laying down a kind of a roadmap of what to do when, and using that qualitative and quantitative kind of research to be able to make sure they're building a long-term roadmap?
Absolutely. The roadmap should always include a strategic layer where you're making sure you're grabbing certain inputs and transforming those into testable experimentation ideas. And sometimes it can be also going a bit scrappy. Sometimes my favorite things to do, and actually later today, I'm talking with one of our clients is in the B2B space, and every year or so, we like to get on the phone with their sales team. What are their frequently asked questions? What are the things that people are asking that aren't on the website? What are the pain points that they might have that's different from a year or two ago? Has the market changed? And ensuring that we're connecting into other organizational units, we're breaking down the silos, we are being able to kind of pollinate our test ideation and our roadmaps with, hey, what are the things that matter? Because it might be a bit reductive, but if you have tests that are inconclusive, you can usually boil it down to two things. People didn't see it, or people didn't care.
Yes, that's very succinct. So if you kind of work on the basis that, and I'm really pleased, by the way, that you're asking sales teams, and I think a B2B business is quite different because there are so many personalities or personas that you have to address in a B2B world,
Hmm.
which you may not have to do in a B2C world. But laying down those different personas, if I was to be able to ask a sales organization, what are they looking for? They're looking for more leads. They're looking for more ability to be able to pass information to this customer without them having to write it all out. How easy is it to
Hmm.
find out that nitty gritty of how their potential customers are frustrated in what they're trying to be able to say on their website? Do you find that an easy task, or will you find that an easy task this afternoon?
It really does depend. There are times where you have sort of observer's bias where you start asking people questions and because they want to please you or because they know that they're trying to contribute to something that they don't want to proverbially call the baby ugly, right? Like they want to try to be they add niceties that aren't really revealing the entire truth. And
You're
so
bringing your
sometimes
psychology into this now, aren't you?
A bit, yeah. There's definitely some consumer behavior or some cognitive psychology things that you have to look out for. And so self-reported information can be a bit biased. So those NPS scores. Um, and that's why it's important to, again, look at your inputs. Can you listen to sales teams and listen to your customers providing feedback and use that as the herald of truth? No, it is an input. It needs to be married with other information, qualitative and other things that can be similar and help kind of flesh things out would be like session replay analytics can be extremely helpful in understanding if there's certain areas where people are feeling frustrated or kind of clicking around.
So you talked earlier about the voice of the customer. And that's a
Hmm.
phrase that has been bandied around for many years, the voice of the customers. And there's different voices of the customers. There's the very happy customer versus the very angry customer versus those who are, as you say, just not interested, which is somewhat in the middle. How easy is it to be able to take those different, and I'll use the word persona again, those different personas to be able to fine tune the content for those different kinds of people, those who are on your side versus those who are ambivalent?
Definitely. Yeah. With voice of customer research, it must be understood that all information is potentially useful, but not actionable. And sort of the biggest way to categorize between those two is when people provide positive praise or a lot of flowery responses to things. Oh, I like it. Everything's great. I have nothing to work with as a CRO practitioner.
But
I can't action off of
but
that.
just let me interject there, because we're talking about reviews, and well, probably 10 years ago, reviews were the rave. Everybody always wanted reviews on their website, and everybody's looking for
Hmm.
for reviews and saying, "Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I've got 5 stars or whatever." Now I feel that people are looking for bad reviews. Now, is that just me, or is that people saying, "Well, there may be 10 good reviews, but this one's here is bad, and therefore I'll look again." And we go into this kind of
Yeah,
state of just keep looking.
you're definitely not alone. And I don't have like hard research to be able to reference, but it is something that I am curious about myself. But it definitely seems that people want to go to reviews not just for the social proof of things, not just are people like me buying this thing, is it solving my problem, but are there objections that I haven't asked
Yeah,
that other people have been able to include in there? Can you understand what are the promises that the brand has laid out in front of me that this is a high quality product and I'm getting a good price for it? And are there any discrepancies that people have provided in those reviews that might suggest otherwise? I think there's reviews can be a place where you really get to that final point of consideration as a consumer, and it's the final test of add to cart or not. But there is also again that area of caution, especially in the world that we live in today, but I'm sure it's not going to change that there are review farms out there. There are bot
yeah.
farms out there. There are very clearly poor reviews that are being ported in and streamed in from many different places. And it takes us to be our own sort of ecom citizenry to understand, okay, is this a real person? Is this not a real person? And similar to as a researcher, we need to sift through and look for the things that appear valid and useful and helpful. And as a consumer, we must do the same too. Be vigilant.
But I think there's this element of sycophanticness that, websites have got lots of good reviews are generally, those are the ones that come up higher in any search, and the bad reviews are
Hmm.
much, much lower. So they're trying to sell their own story. But one of the things I think from bad reviews is, from a CRO perspective, that's actually a good thing to be able to get your teeth into doing something to change it.
Definitely. Those bad reviews are the ones that are authentic, and usually bot farms aren't going to be spitting out bad reviews.
Hopefully.
That'd be a bit counterintuitive. But certainly, when we get negative reviews, it gives the brand an opportunity to listen, empathize, and hear that as a potential in their inputs of, maybe this is something we ought to change, or maybe this is something we could look at. What we've done is we've helped with some of our customers. Again, this is it can be e-com, but it could be B2B as well. There's those third-party trusted review sites like
Yeah.
Trustpilot is just coming to mind. There's a ton of great information out there that people are providing to you, and it would be a disservice to your consumers not to listen. Again, it might not all be um, exactly useful or actionable, but it's to make consumer-centric decisions, you need to involve customers at every point of decision-making process.
So the other element of getting input into that is surveys. Whether it's on your own site or whether it's, you go out to one of these organisations that do surveys on your behalf. Do they really work, do you think?
It's a touchy subject. I think with surveys, especially in the world of UX research, they work. It's a great way of giving audience an opportunity to provide feedback, but there are definitely some potential areas where we need to understand that the people responding to surveys are survey responders. And maybe there's a lot of unnecessary friction we've put up along the way in that survey, especially we've all seen that where it's like 1-page survey with 50 questions
Yeah.
all at once or whatnot. It just is going to become a barrier. So how can we effectively do better at surveys? A couple things that I always remind myself and my team when building surveys is, what is the goal? What are we trying to get? We're trying to get action from it. So let's make this as actionable as possible. Don't crowbar or shoehorn every question you could ever want. We need to do away with the wants, really. It's just what's needed in our survey. Let's keep it as streamlined as possible to try to improve those response rates. And then again, people are going to be potentially having self-response and observer biases. There could be other factors at play. So it is worth it to still review that as an input and measure it against the other inputs that we have as well.
So one of the things,
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
it does. I'm really intrigued at this because one of the things that in a B2B world, you obviously have to use some element of surveying to be able to know that you're talking to that particular audience, i.e. whether it's a purchaser, whether it's a technical guy, whatever it might be, in the right language, in the right voice, if you like. And so therefore asking questions along the way, who are you, what's your job role, things like that, is a very easy path to follow. Whereas when you're in a consumer world, it becomes much less kind of focusing, but much more on, I suppose, asking questions about what would you like to do today? Do you have any guidance with regard to being able to use surveys to positively promote action?
So in the world of surveys, there are kind of two flavors. And I'm going to roll it up even to UX
Okay.
research. And we talk about them as iterative and transformative. And I think there's generative, I think is the other term actually that's used. So generative and iterative. And sometimes with surveys or UX research or user interviews or whatever tactic we're using for the goals at hand, we might have something that we want to move things along. We want to try to understand existing friction, existing pain points, and correct for those. That's iterative. We're trying to take small steps forward. The benefit there too is usually those activities are lower resource investments, time investments, whereas generative research or transformative research is trying to create something brand new or reinvent it completely. And so that's going to take a lot more energy, effort, time, and resources to accomplish. And I think that's something that in the world of UX research, we tie back to CRO, especially when we have clients say, I want big wins, I want really big tests, I want to move the needle. It's like, yes, I agree, we're with you. But we have the small kind of pixel pushing tests that we'd consider more iterative,
Yeah.
fairly simple A/B tests. And then there are other kinds of tests that are going to be much bigger impact, but much bigger resourcing required. Do we have proper designs? Have we thought through the overall flow from start to finish and the boundaries outside that test? What is this going to do to impact our analytics or observability? And so in order to ensure that we have a proper balance of not just getting bogged down with heavy tests, have a blend between those iterative, quick, rapid experiments, and then save some of your resources. And once you've identified certain areas for those transformative or those generative tests.
You mentioned website design. And one of the things that has bugged me all the way through my career has been that website design usually ends up at the CEO or something like that. Not always, but it often does. And it's based more on design than on actionable insight. Is it difficult? Do you think it's difficult to be able to get that kind of dual play, that it looks good and it also works? And has that to be done at the very beginning, or do you think that is an iterative process? Because website design often is very inflexible because of the format of the design, or the images or the videos that they use. I'm just trying to think, is can you make that an iterative process to change certain elements if you feel that the website design as a whole doesn't work?
Absolutely. There are definitely opportunities for companies to be able to have websites that both look good, which is subjective, so we can come back to that, but are visually pleasing, but also high performing. But in order to get there, it does take a lot of sort of restraint to ensure that the choices that you're making are in benefit of the end user and and the company as well. But having some cool, slick feature, or being too dazzled by trends or something trendy in the design space, those can all run foul, and those trendy things might be a good idea to test.
Mm-hmm.
And just because it won this year, maybe you retest it again and ensure that it's still working for you. But really, it does take a lot of restraint in order to make decisions that both abide by the end user, their goals, and the company and its goals, and making those come together.
Let's go back to the main title, which is how do you
Yeah.
continue to feed the CRO engine? We've talked about the things that you can utilize as tools to be able to help you guide that. But is there a format or a kind of a program of events you should be looking at to be able to say, actually, we need to look at that first, then we need to look at that second? Or is it, as most people would say and answer this, it depends?
That's our favorite answer. Absolutely, it depends. I would say the thing it depends most on is velocity. How many tests are you looking to run, and are you capable of
Is more
running?
better?
If you, yeah, it's a little bit more, it depends, but I've put a period on the end instead of ellipses. So it depends on velocity. And the reason why I say that is if you're at a place in the experimentation maturity continuum where your company is running 2, 3 tests a month, then the number of inputs and data that you need coming in from a strategic level, it will be less frequently needed. You could maybe do a usability study every year. You could maybe do a survey every year, and along with your analytics or session replay, or again, champions in other departments like customer service or sales, that might give you enough ammunition to be able to run through a whole year's worth of experiments. But if you're running 5, 8, 10 experiments per month, you're going to need to ensure that you're continually investing and ideating through multiple different sources. So like we have a couple clients where we run quarterly usability studies, and each one is a little bit different, and we roadmap them out. So we lock in one quarter, and the next quarter we have a good idea of, but it might change. And we have a backlog of other ideas, but we leave this very open to the team. We're very flexible with how we want to run this. But this way, if there's a certain product detail page that might be the focus topic for this particular UX sprint, a quarterly sprint, then the next one, it might be cart and checkout and sort of that flow. So that combined with all these other different things that we've talked through, and ensuring that you're continually weaving in customer information, you will have a ton of ammunition. So it really just depends, again, on velocity.
And just to go back, more tests obviously will give you a faster throughput to be able to make better decisions. And obviously, if you've got
Yep.
enough visitors on your site, that helps enormously.
And John, it will also help with
Yeah.
ROI, because if you're paying for a 5-figure platform that is enabling you to run experiments and not a band-aid together homegrown solution, and you're only running 2 tests a month, your ability to effectively communicate ROI is going to be really, really hard. Maybe you're going to have some banner tests
Mm-hmm.
that will help you get there. But if you're running 5x that with the same platform, that's the same cost, you really could amortize that cost across all those tests. And it's so much easier of a justification when it comes to an ROI perspective if you're able to to maximize velocity. But you really do need to think about how effective you are with velocity. It is I think we've heard them before, and hopefully we don't have too many that are running around, but some people profess, I'm just going to run every single test I possibly can. I'm going to test until I'm blue in the face, and I don't care what design says. I don't care what stakeholders say. I'm just going to run every test, and if it wins, then I have data to prove that. Well, again, are you solving real problems? Are you causing bottlenecks? Are you introducing code or other issues? Are you disrupting customer experience too much? I mean, there's so many different things that and maybe there are some benefits to that, right? Maybe there are some benefits to throttling velocity up, to just running tests sort of without
Mm-hmm.
abandon. But our methodology at CXperts is absolutely use customer experience as your throttle into velocity.
But as you say, things change, don't they? You could run a test
Hmm.
today and it shows a fantastic return, whether that's monetary value or not. And then in a month's time, things outside of the control of the company that is running these tests may influence things differently. I'll give you an example. If you think of somebody who is buying something from a particular company and then decides that actually there's some news outside which says this company is doing whitewashing or whatever it might be, it's got some negative impact to it. That's going to change what you've just done in your test from being successful to potentially being unsuccessful. So boiling that down is, how often should you be reviewing the tests that you've already done?
There are often times where we need to retest and revalidate the finding. Typically, this is going to be when there are mental models with our consumers that have changed. If there are certain sort of UX collective behaviors that we've seen be adjusted over time. I think one particular example, especially for e-com, is the cart page. It was so very clear many years, 10 years ago probably, that it went product listing page, product detail page, cart page,
Mm-hmm.
checkout. And now there's so many times that I'm seeing on sites where the cart page has become completely stepped over, or maybe it's treated almost interstitial, especially with mini carts or little pop-out flyouts or little things of that nature, that it might be worth retesting
Mm-hmm.
then. And continuing to retest, because maybe that cart page, though, has other values that benefit both the company and the consumer. Uh, I think it was an article from Baymard Institute where they were talking about how the cart page can often be seen as a wish list, that users are using that cart page as where they add to cart and then they'll leave and come back and know that their cart is still there, because there is no sort of save functionality for a wish list. So consumers could be using carts for other reasons. I think the other example that I have is, again, this is probably like a 10 year old insight, but I think it still has merit. That Amazon is, of course, such a dominant
Mm-hmm.
force in e-commerce and many of our lives. And a lot of people, myself included, saw what Amazon was doing, and there was that sort of goldenrod color for their
Yep.
buttons. And a lot of people wanted to test toward that. Okay, if Amazon, whatever's Amazon's doing, we're doing. I want a goldenrod button too. And we would test that and it would work. It was great. It seemed to be a sort of almost guaranteed test, and it's never test is guaranteed. That's why we test. But maybe people were moving into the goldenrod color, but in concert with the rest of their color palette and branding, after time, that sort of goldenrod effect
Yep.
diminished, and that might be an opportunity. And the way you might see that diminish is you see a slow and steady decline in your add to cart rates. Like, there could be a quantitative trigger to help you understand where you should go back and retest. And so if you're seeing on your add to cart, your PDP pages, your add to cart start to go down, well, is there something we did a year ago or 2 years ago that maybe moved the needle up, that was a big win, and maybe do we need to revalidate that test?
One of the other things that I think is quite interesting as well is that in a B2B world, we've talked about you can focus on different personas inside of that. In a B2C, that's somewhat more challenging. But is testing, or can you test intergenerational? So, for instance, if you've got a site that sells holidays, obviously they don't just sell one type of holiday. They might sell holidays for seniors. They might sell holidays for teens, as 1830 used to be, or they might sell all of those things together. How can we be able to make sure that CRO plays its part in those intergenerational things? Because I think that's a very strong avenue for testing, because you don't speak to everybody in the same language today, especially, rather than not just about saying the things that might interest them.
Hmm. It is interesting, especially with testing. It would be pretty difficult, and maybe it might bring in some ethical questions around how can you test, target, and segment by users by certain age demographics. There could be some
Yeah.
complexities there. We have definitely understood this, though, when it comes to UX research. Who do we talk to? Right? When it comes to UX research, you are asking people to participate, and you might have specific criteria. And one thing that I tend to try to recommend to the teams that we're working with is let's talk to people that might be a bit older than target market. There could be some things that we aren't thinking of that they're experiencing that would be really valuable to use. So, specifically, in 40 plus audience, you start to have trouble vision. Your retinas are just, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, but I know that that's a thing. That once you hit 40, then you get the extendo arm when it comes to your
I can just
smartphone.
see these optical online resellers now. Are you 40? You need some glasses.
Are you 40? Yeah, right. I know. So personalization, I'm sure would be rampant around that. We want to ensure that we're including diverse audiences when it comes to UX research, that we're talking with multitude of kinds of people, right? If we only talked to 20 something females, then we're going to have a very skewed view. We're going to have a lot of bias in our data. And so let's talk to a diverse group of people. Sure, maybe 20 something females is the target audience, but from a website usability perspective, they're going to be fine. If we're accounting for others that have, visual difficulties or other, I don't want to even call them disabilities, different
Mm-hmm.
abilities. And I think the similar things are true when it comes to B2B. That can translate to don't speak to your technical audience too
Yeah.
much. Make sure that information is available there. It is available for them to access or request, but ensure that you're talking to your broadest audience as possible so that way you don't alienate anyone and you are effectively communicating.
But wouldn't you say, in that kind of respect, that if you're going to, I don't know, let's say it's a piece of software that somebody's trying to buy, that when they come onto that, you can kind of, by use of short surveys, who are you? What's your job role? And just keeping it a job role, saying, okay, I'm in technical. So what are you looking for today? A drop down of 4 or 5 different sections. You can then
Hmm.
start to, because you've earned the right to talk to them, because you've asked the question,
Hmm.
you can then be much more technical. So I think even
Hmm.
having that kind of short little survey at the beginning and testing that, obviously, to make sure that it resonates with people, is probably another step in this kind of feeding the CRO engine, which could be quite useful.
Absolutely, John. You're really on exactly on the bullseye for that one. And this is now, I think, would be a really good discussion for us to have as a follow-up. But this is the world of
Mm-hmm.
personalization. If users can inform us, that they can give us a bit of information that they're looking for or about them, qualities that they might have, then we can personalize. And again, if I'm being extremely reductive, I believe the best personalization strategies are thought with relevance as the key thing. Are we adding relevance? Are we adding convenience to this user's journey? And therefore, we should lean into personalization. But if personalization is done for whimsy or um, other, I think, myopic views, then personalization will fall apart.
Yeah, I think it has to be sincere. It has to be,
Sincere,
it has to
absolutely.
be that you are there, you are asking for some level of questions to refine the customer journey. And then once you
Hmm.
get into that customer journey, you have to talk to that person within the confines of what they're interested in.
I have a great example for you around that. Um, Many years ago, we were working with a company that sells knee braces and shoulder braces and wrist guards
Mm-hmm.
online. And they had two extremely different audiences. One were performance
Yeah.
athletes, weightlifters, and another, the aging and the elderly. couldn't be more different as far as what they were looking for. And so we first experimented this, validated that the results were statistically significant, and then rolled out a personalization strategy if people came in from certain keywords on landing pages and then visited product pages based on certain like knee pain, knee strain, whatever the particular things are. I don't remember the exact specifics here, but we personalized those product detail pages based on where the user was coming from. We were not lying, right? It was still above board, but we were trying to improve the information sent available to people that this product is right for them and their needs.
Stephen, you mentioned personalization as being another topic, and I think that's absolutely something I'll pick up with you in the coming months, because I think I have my own views of personalization, very strong views about personalization and how personalization should be. And I think one of the things that I'm not in my 20s, I'm not in my 30s, I'm not in my 40s, I'm that needing to wear glasses kind of person that you talk about. But I think that there are certain elements which you can see that a website actually is following their rules as opposed to following the customer's rules. And one particular example I've got is you can't speak to anybody, physically call them.
Mm-hmm.
You can only go through a chat bot now. You have chatbots now which are manned by one person who is dealing with maybe 16 or 17 different chats at one time. That's where I think personalization really needs to be put back on the front burner as opposed to sitting on the back burner, because I know they're trying to cut costs by doing those sorts of things, but I think it's essential that people have the ability to do something which will enable them to move further on in that journey. And I think we're missing out on that.
Absolutely. It's such a disservice to your customers. They're paying you, right? They are potential loyal customers out there that are easy to break loyalty when you fail to let them reach out to you in the avenues that make sense for them and the part of the journey that they're on. So I couldn't agree more, and I definitely think this is a bigger conversation.
So Stephen, I think we've given enough kind of input, or you've given enough input into how to continue to feed the CRO engine, and obviously that'll vary by company, by market segment, by B to B versus B to C. But I think it's given certainly some thoughts about how people should go about finding different bits and pieces to be able to keep that engine not just trickling along, but going at full speed as well, because there's more than enough in what we've discussed thus far. But for now, Stephen,
exactly,
we've been together now for 40 minutes or so, something like that. I'd like to thank you so much for this. I will pick up on the personalization thing because I think that's a great topic for next time. But for now, Stephen, thank you very much for your time.
John, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to our next chat.